Hello, Tony. Hello, everyone. Good evening, Tony. How are you tonight?
Doing good, man. How about yourself? How are you doing, brother?
Wonderful. I couldn't wait for this for this live again for this podcast, and I'm
Yeah.
so excited about today's topic and whatever the topic is going to be. Like, please, take me,
All right.
take me, take me to
So
the fairy
after
tale.
after our last podcast, um, I had somebody ask me to elaborate a little bit more about some comments that I made. And one of the comments that they wanted me to elaborate on was when I said that mixed breeds are being victimized by rescue organizations that are claiming to help them. And
Hmm.
then also what do I mean about I don't um I don't I don't normally support shelters because I don't work with backyard breeders. And they're like, that's totally opposite of what I was thinking, and they wanted me to elaborate on it. So I did write a short blog, a little bit more in detail, and I wanted to share it with the audience. And then you and me can just pick it apart and start talking a little bit more in detail about what your experience has been and what's my experience has been. So I'll go
Okay.
ahead and read that to everybody now. And then I think once we publish the podcast, people will have a link to this article if they wanted to read it.
Okay.
But what it says here is the shocking truth how pet rescue organizations are keeping animals trapped in a cycle of suffering. So it's just a 2 minute read here, or probably less than that. The pet rescue industry, once a noble endeavor and aimed at giving abandoned animals a second chance, has increasingly become mired in practices that perpetuate the very problems it seeks to solve. By focusing on maintaining a steady flow of animals through shelters, many rescue organizations have inadvertently contributed to the victimization of pets, often overlooking the best interests of the animals in their care. One of the most concerning practices is the importation of feral street pets from other countries, such as Mexico, to replenish shelter populations in the United States. This practice surged during the COVID-19 pandemic, when American shelters briefly achieved a historic milestone of zero adoptable dogs. Instead of celebrating this success, rescue organizations began sourcing animals from abroad, bringing in pets with little to no socialization and often significant behavioral issues. These animals, having missed critical developmental stages, require extensive rehabilitation and pose a challenge for adopters, leading to a higher rates of returns and further trauma for the dogs. Additionally, the proliferation of poorly regulated backyard breeders has been tactically supported by the rescue industry policies. These breeders who do not conduct proper health testing or spay and neuter their animals contribute to the cycle of overpopulation and neglect. When these pets end up in shelters, they are often adopted out without adequate vetting or support, leaving new owners to deal with the unforeseen health or behavioral problems. The lack of comprehensive follow up and support from rescue organizations further exasperates the issue, as exemplified by cases where adopters are left with sick animals and no resources for assistance. Moreover, the rise of online certification courses has diluted the quality of training and care within the industry. Many trainers lack practical experience, relying on theoretical knowledge rather than hands on skills. This shift has undermined the effectiveness of training programs, making it difficult for adopters to manage and rehabilitate their new pets. The rescue organization's focus on quick adoptions and high turnover rates often leads to insufficient preparation and support for both the animals and their new owners. In conclusion, while the intentions behind pet rescue organizations are commendable, their current practices have led to unintended consequences that keep animals in a perpetual state of victimization. By importing feral animals, enabling irresponsible breeding, and failing to provide adequate support, these organizations have compromised the welfare of the pets they aim to protect. To truly make a positive impact, the rescue industry must reevaluate and reform its protocols, prioritizing the health and well-being of animals over maintaining shelter populations. And this is a really interesting concept. It's also a very controversial one, especially if there's a lot of rescue organizations out there. But there's, I remember when COVID-19 was in full force and everybody was being quarantined, a lot of businesses were starting to go out of business. A lot of them were hurting because of all the quarantine restrictions. At that time, that's when my business was booming. So it was really, really interesting because during COVID-19, none of the dog trainers or none of my colleagues or behaviorists were having any fluctuation of cases. If anything, they were getting more cases. But then we hit this plateau where all of a sudden we had a drop in people that needed help. And one of the things that I started seeing in the news was, for the first time in history, the United States had no homeless dogs. For the first time in history, you would go to a shelter and they'd be empty. There were no dogs for adoption. And I thought that should have been a reason for celebration. Because if I were to tell somebody right now, and maybe somebody that doesn't know this, if I were to say, hey, could you imagine what if there were no dogs in the animal shelters? What if all of the dogs got adopted out? All of the people that couldn't keep their dogs found homes, and there's literally zero animals in the animal shelter. Could you believe that? And most people would say that would never, ever happen. But it did. It did happen. There was a point in the US where we had absolutely zero animals in the shelter. But when they went to go take the animals from Mexico and the street animals, and by the way, they're not just getting animals from the Mexican shelters. They're picking up their street dogs, dogs that are sick, dogs that have major cognitive issues, and just carrying them over to have something to adopt out kind of started to wake me up and started to realize what's really the motive of rescue and shelter. And I think the motive is raising so many funds that I don't really see it going back to the owners or the shelter animals. Because when I at one point had a breeder, when I bought a purebred dog, I had so much support. And I'm not talking about backyard breeders, because I know a lot of people go, oh, I hate breeders. I'm talking about like a legitimate breeder. They basically did health testing. They guaranteed the health. They bred for temperament. However their puppies acted, if I were to call the breeder wouldn't be surprised because she knows, her puppies very well. But if something were to happen where back in the day I would need help and go, oh my gosh, I'm having problems with this puppy, I could call the breeder and they're just as knowledgeable as many of the trainers because they raise their dogs, in their homes. They know them. They offer great advice. I don't have to pay for any of that advice. Also, if I needed help because one of my animals were sick, the breeders were always the first to jump in and say, oh my gosh, I can't believe the animal's sick. What did they say? They said it's hereditary. Oh my gosh, we worked really hard. I did all the health testing. And they will either help or they'll take the puppy back and nurse it back to health or deal with the medical expenses on their own. So they would always take their puppies back. Or they would replace the puppy because they didn't want the financial burden to be on me. And a lot of times those breeders will let you keep the sick puppy if you're willing to take care of it and cover the medical expenses. But they don't make you do that. You don't have to do that. Yet when I go to the shelters, and I used to work at many shelters before, which is the reason why I kind of have this thought now. I didn't have the greatest experience working with shelters, but I knew one shelter organization or one rescue organization that she basically kept her dogs intact. She had a dachshund and she had puggles and she had some other breeds. And she would breed them. Anytime they would go into season, she would breed them. And she'd bring the puppies into the shelter to adopt them out in the shelter. And I thought to myself, well, that makes you a backyard breeder. Why would you do that? Why don't you neuter your pets? And I
Mm-hmm.
started realizing the money she was making by doing that. And it made her, in my eyes, no different than an animal flipper. No different than somebody that says, I'm going to give your dog a good home. And then you give the dog a good home, rethinking it's a good home. And then that person who you thought was going to be the new owner flips your animal like a car and gets them a new home and raises the price of whatever it is that you charge them for the rescue. And I'm starting to see this trend quite a bit in the rescue organizations. And I'm also
Mm-hmm.
seeing rescue organizations start to glorify mixed breeds, saying, oh, come get your puggle at the shelter. This is an Oscardoodle, kind of glamorizing that. And a
Mm-hmm.
lot of them are phenotyping, meaning that when you go to the shelter, you look at those cards and it's like pit bull crossed with Australian Shepherd or German Shepherd and Maltipoo. And a lot of people don't realize that when you're looking for an animal that's going to fit your lifestyle, the breed is important. And finding a quality breeder that will tell you whether that breed will fit your lifestyle is important. But when you trust that little index card on the case that says this is a Doberman Dalmatian mix, a lot of people don't realize that phenotyping is very, very inadequate. If you're doing genetic testing, if a rescue organization is going to promise you that there's certain breeds in this dog, and that would help you understand whether or not that's going to fit your lifestyle, you would think
Mm-hmm.
that they would take all the money that they're raising and do embark testing or some sort of genetic testing so they could say this dog really is 10% Dalmatian, 80% lab or whatever, right? But instead they just post this phenotyping and people trust the phenotyping. Then they realize that this dog's not a good fit for them. And the shelter is almost looking forward to the turnover. Like I remember when I was working at a rescue organization, there was this one dog that had been in this rescue organization for 2 years. They said it was their oldest foster. And I thought to myself, oh my gosh, this is the oldest foster. We got to get this guy at home. And I didn't know why he was being returned, but because I was the behaviors working with them and helping them, I later learned from a lot of the owners that this dog was not really good with small animals and children. And I thought to myself, oh my gosh, I didn't even know that. So now I know that when this dog comes back, we're going to be able to work with this dog. When she brought her dog back, she told them that the dog had bit her child. And the first thing they said was, are you sure? Are you sure he wasn't playing? Did you go to the hospital? Was it a puncture or a scratch? Oh, it was more of a scratch. Well, just so you know, if we take him back, we're just going to put him straight down. And literally made this lady feel so horrible.
Mm.
And she was debating on whether or not she was going to keep them or not. I talked to the woman and I said, you know what? This animal is not safe for you. I wouldn't worry that it's going to be euthanized. It can't hurt children. And in that case, I mean, if anything, I'd like to work with it and see what's going on with that dog. And so she returned it. Before I even had a chance to work on it, they adopted out again. And I said, whoa, why did you adopt that dog out? Oh, he's been in this rescue for 2 years now. He always gets returned. Don't worry, we're going to find him a good home. He's
Okay.
biting people. So you don't care. You're just charging $500 every single time you adopt them out. It's residual income for them.
Mm.
So a lot of those rescue organizations are just as bad as animal flippers. It's just seen as more acceptable. I've seen that. So what is your experience? Have you worked with a lot of shelters and rescues and noticed anything interesting?
Yes. When I was living in Serbia, back in Serbia, my company had a foundation on the side trying to fix the problem of the urban setting, and it was like a country in transition. So a lot
Mm-hmm.
of dogs were like, considered abandoned, and a lot of stray dogs and things like that. And I was really diving into how this setting can change. And I was kind of like pursuing a mainstream agenda, like you need to spay and neuter and responsible ownership and things like that. And I was kind of thinking that the forever circle of these mixed breeds, how we actually call the dogs that doesn't fit any breed standard, are actually coming out from being abandoned. But
Right.
as I was trying really to learn, and then just left on the street, right? Like leave the dog on the street. But then I was more and more in tune with that, to create a platform for that foundation to function and to actually, they were like trying to fund the projects that would help raise awareness about ownership and things like that. So I was kind of making money and then taking part of that money and put it in a use for the good cause. But then more as I was learning about the dog, and more I was learning about what does it mean to have. You can hear me, right?
Yeah, I hear you.
More that you can think like how that dog on a street end up on a street, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then I was joining a couple of expeditions. I saw some, Bulgaria, Albania, Serbia, Mexico, Lima, Peru. So I was going to observe urban settings of the dog. Even now, our institute conducts one very comprehensive study in rural India, where you have those dogs that just live in a community and they live a normal village life. And they are not owned by no one, yet they have every single thing they need to live and survive. Mm. And then slowly I was getting introduced to that construct and a concept of the stray urban dogs. That is how I ended up researching and learning by my very big mentor and inspiration, Ray Coppinger, the late Ray Coppinger. He was one of the amazing canine enthusiasts that was actually researching the dogs and researching their behavior. And he said there is a wonderful book that I recommend to everyone called What is a Dog? Mm-hmm. And on the page number 35, he said, very interesting, he said, there is around 1 billion dogs. So this is a book written and published in, let's say, London, and published the year of.
Is this by the person that you just mentioned?
Yeah. Ray Coppinger, yes. Published 2016. So it says he says there is around 1 billion dogs in the world. 3/4 of them look much as like each other, as do the individuals of any other species. Very interesting thing is to say that about 85% of those dogs live the life on their own, reproduce like any other species on this planet. And interestingly, every single dog that the humans have a reproductive control of fits only 15% of that. So me and you here talking about the shelters, about the breeders, about dogs that live in visual proximity of the humans, made total of 15% of the total canine Lupus familiaris species known as dog. 85%, Tony, we will never ever see. They live on the edges of the man's in the world, especially in the rural the world is. More urban dogs or stray dogs or village dogs, how do they call them? So those dogs are not mixed breed. Those dogs are village dogs. Those dogs are actually fundamental dog out from which all breeds that we know today are made. And he said, trying to solve the problem of the controlling 15% of the population that the humans think will be solved by spaying, neutering, and moral activities towards them wouldn't touch the species of the dogs that live around the humans, like it was for the centuries. So overpopulation of the dogs does not exist. It would be, now we can debate, is the overpopulation of the mankind exist on the planet? Are we overpopulated with the humans on the same way that we are overpopulating with the dogs? And you know that the spaying and the neutering, I don't know, are you familiar with that? But around the 70s, India had a law that Indira Gandhi was put that law in practice. And she said, like, in order to control a population of the humans, we need to castrate 4 million people. And she literally did. The doctors and the guards and the police and the military were going through the villages, and they got caught. 4 million was like a bracket that they need to do. They castrated 7 million Indian men without solving the problem of the overpopulation. So that's kind of like a thinking.
Makes me wonder if the Indian men ran, because I would have ran. Sorry? I would run.
They ran, of course they ran, but they were like captured by the police like dogs. Like you would have like police entering the homes and villages and forcefully castrate the young kids and castrate the men in order to fulfill the bracket. And of course, we know that today India is one of the most populated countries in the world. So castration actually does not solve the problem. And we have like, I don't know, are you familiar with this, that World Organization, World Agency, it's not a World Association of the Small Clinic, like a small veterinarian practice, issued a new recommendation when the spaying and neutering is placed. They said like spaying and neutering should be practiced only as a therapeutic way. So if you have a problem in the dog's body that requires spaying and neutering as a solution, as a problem solving surgery, but if the owners are responsible and they are able to take care about their bitches and dogs, they should not neuter and spay the dogs, because the veterinarians and everything that we talk about now is just moral pressure on the people by hijacked with this term overpopulation of the dogs. And if we do not spay and neuter the dogs, we will have dogs living everywhere. The dogs do live everywhere around the humans. And depend on how do you enter to research on this topic, you will find that more dogs live in the nature without influence of the humans than this one that me and you are training or trying to fix the problem of overpopulation of the dogs.
And a lot of research now is also showing too the damage that neutering and spaying has on dogs, that creates behavioral issues and actually raises the chances of having cancer, because a lot of the vets are saying, oh, you reduce cancer risk if you spay and neuter your animal. And now there's been studies by the Veterinary Medicine Board showing that, well, spaying and neutering them, especially young, which was a very highly popularized thing, especially with the pets that they'd give, clients, the veterinarians would, actually raises the cancer risk.
Yeah, of course, because they said like if you have this if you remain with the if we leave the dog with the testicles and the uterus and the ovaries and all of those organs can develop cancer. And they said like better, spay and neuter them so this organ doesn't develop cancer. But then you have like a clever ones saying like we can develop a brain cancer. Why do we just not take out the brain? Because it can got cancer. So everything that we are here actually raising this. And then I was it's
really interesting. Humans don't know how to just leave shit alone. Like we always have to mess with something. And we create this crazy unbalance and dysfunction.
Yeah, and that's what actually we are actually doing by going into the nature and trying to fix and save everyone. And this, when you become a savior, then we know. No, I need to stop talking about you. Like if you become a savior, no, like
not me. I'm not with you, brother.
No, it's nothing to do with you, my friend. It's just kind of like when let's put it I think like that's maybe will sound.
But it's not us.
And just us.
It's like everybody else.
Mankind, like humans.
Mankind,
go out there and think that we need to save someone and someone is in trouble and now I need to be better and good and things like that. So I don't know, actually, do you know that this PETA, the PETA, the
PETA,
it's one of the, they only shelters that they have usually, they would have like kill shelters because they think that the humans shouldn't have dogs as a pets. And if we want some toys, we should go out there and buy toys and let other species live their life without a human influence. And with that said, I was kind of like very when I learned about that PETA, I was like, I had like very strange feelings about that. But then I learned about that dignity and how do we leave the dogs to live dignified life. And every single thing in the nature that we think we should fix, and we need to help, and we are this magnificent creature in the planet that has all the tools and solutions to every single species problem. We kind of like better would be to leave nature itself to find a way to organize itself much better than we can ever think about we will be able to solve the solution of anyone.
Yeah.
For example,
it's really clear to me too. It's really clear to me that a lot of the rescue organizations, every single one of them have mixed breeds. Like it's very seldom that I will go to a rescue organization and see a purebred Papillon, right? Or a purebred Chinese Crested. They're always mixed. And the other thing also too is one of the reasons why is because a lot of responsible breeders, they have contracts in place that if anybody buys their dog, it's not to go to a shelter. So the breeders take that self-responsibility, and legally they say, if you don't want this dog anymore, you have to return it to me so I can find it a proper home and keep track. And also breeders follow up with their puppies. Breeders contact their clients every once in a while, send them birthday cards because their puppies, had a second-year birthday and so forth, which I know a lot of shelters don't do that. And I'm really starting to realize that breeders aren't the issue at all. It's really actually the animal shelter.
Like a construct, like I will save the world and I will save the dogs. And for example, for example, when I was trying to build a shelter in Serbia, like I was trying to find which one we should support with the foundation, or should we build one, or things like that. And then I suddenly learned about this construct of the like village dogs or stray dogs or urban dogs, call them whatever you want, but those dogs belong to the street. And those dogs have a life circle like any other animal. Like you would say that those dogs are overpopulated. You don't have any species on this planet of which offspring survive more than 10%. You have those turtles that have like thousands of eggs and thousands of eggs and thousands of eggs, yet handful of them survive the first year. And that's the most endangered species in the world because their habitat is whatever is happening to them, like destroyed, right? Or the same happened to dogs. When you have a stray dogs and they have a litters every 6 weeks or every 6 months, and they have a litter of 5, litter of 3, litter of 7, like 10% of those dogs or those puppies survives first 3 months. Yeah. And out of those puppies that survive first 3 months, 10% survives the first year because they need to go through the cycle of knowing what the spring and summer and the autumn and the winter life means. So if we would leave the dogs out there as they are really doing, like a problem is that the dogs out there like this, what Coppinger is talking about, 85% of the world population of the dog is still doing the same. They look alike. They look like a dog that we would call mixed breed, but it's not a mixed breed. It's not a mixed breed. It's a village dog that looks like a combination of a lot of breeds. But when you come to the source, the breeds that we know today are made of selection of those village dogs. So that's original dog. Because when we say like, that's also a very interesting point. Like, did a human domesticated a wolf? Or like a breeding on its own started with the humans already have a village dogs as a transitioning portion from wolf into a modern dog. Because that's actually what Coppinger and Belyayev later on with the silver fox experiment showed that happened, is actually the humans never domesticated the wolf. The wolf.
Well, I deal with wolf dogs, and a lot of times people will say, "Why do you work with wolf dogs? That's so wrong that people would breed a wolf with a dog." And I have to explain to them, the wolf dogs that I'm working with, none of those were bred with a wild wolf. Those wolf dogs are generational wolf dogs that are just a wolf dog with wolf dog breeding.
The whole point of urban dog is that you have that transitional phase in between wolf and a modern dog, like a bred dogs that we breed today. Like and then the humans couldn't go out there and domesticate the wolves, because I know like at least 10 experiments that I was really, really deeply researching about, seeing, and those experiments had a one clue on what age the wolf puppy should be taken away from nature, from their mother, and try to be domesticated, try to make a dog out from the wolf, or wolf dog out from the wolf. If you take a puppy, no matter is it 1 day, or it's a 6 week, or it's 1 month, that wolf, when comes into a home setting, and you have person taking care about that dog, that wolf, occasionally that wolf gonna be attracted to the take care, to the care provider, caregiver, right? Until it doesn't get sexually matured. So at the age of 8 months, 9 months, 1 year, when that first impulse of the hormones happen, if that
for wolf dogs and for wolves, it's actually about 2.5 to 3 years is when they hit sexual maturity.
No,
and then their behavior switches.
Not necessarily that they need to kind of become like let's say, but let's take it 2 years. Okay, it's 2 years, because the experiment these 10 experiments was conducted by the what was the name of that institution in Hungary, and it was called wolf watching experiment, and was conducted by the Department of the Etiology of Hungarian University. And then they said like the wolf were 7 months old when they started to attack. It's not attack. It was just challenging the caregiver. So it was not, the people were not able to control the wolf once they were mature enough to start trying to find the place in the little pack, and then they become completely like unmanageable. So the only way you can keep managing those wolves would be to spay them. But that's not the way how you make a dog from wolf, by spaying them, because that's not possible. So
what kind of wolves was that? What kind of wolves were they studying, that organization?
Like it was like the gray wolf, the one that we all agree was the beginning of the gray wolves. And they said they had the gray wolves because Europe is full of them, right? It's still like a lot of gray wolves days. So anytime we can start an experiment of the evolution from the beginning, like just have if this is what happened like 10,000 years ago, go out there, pick up the wolf, and start the domestication process tomorrow. We can do that, because there is a beginning of the evolution chain. Why we cannot start it again? Because it's not the species that the humans domesticated. The wolves domesticated themselves and turned themselves through the 5,000 years of evolution. They turned themselves into a stray dog, into a village dog, into urban dog. And just that was a dog that humans, children probably, or whoever saw out there, like it's a creature that doesn't flee away. It's not, it's kind of like, looks even cute. And that was the dog, that was a creature that the people took in their homes and started this circle of domestication. So it was not a wolf. And that's the biggest glitch of the understanding of human-dog interaction and the human-dog behavior problem and challenges, lays in that the dog is wolf that actually changed its shape in order to become much more appealing to the humans. Because today,
so what are the animal shelters doing about that?
Sorry?
So what are the animal shelters doing about that, since we're talking about kind of rescue organizations?
What they are doing is actually trying to, that's exactly when you are taking a wild animal and you are putting it in a shelter. That's what I was thinking about when I started to do this thing in Serbia. I said, like, if you have a dog out there that are learning how to live in urban settings, and there is no access to the food, there is no access to the water, they would naturally go away They would get out from the cars, from the setting that can kill them. Through the generations, they would learn not to approach like a busy streets and busy areas. And in that way, the humans and dogs can live together, creating this wonderful, perfectly healthy ecosystem. But when you go out there and see this urban dog that is out there, and now you label this dog like a mixed breed that someone left out from home, now you have immediately an amazing major problem that you want to take that dog and put it in some shelter and try to find a new owner for that, because we are thinking that these urban dogs are the dogs that are kicked out from the home, and they are poor dogs that no one wants to care about, and they should have some shelter. What we'll try to find a new home for them, or actually gonna care for them until there is money to care for them. And we have a lot of things when you have, and now the question becomes like, would that dog like to live the life outside these shelters and even homes of the people? And if we ask like, which dog is a more happier dog, the dog that chases the cars and dog that lives out there somewhere on the street, or the dog that is hooked on our sofa, and the dog that's in some shelter, in some cages, on some leads? Even though that these dogs that live by our side can live like life of 17, 20, 25 years old, and the dogs on the street probably wouldn't survive like 3 to 5 years, enough to have 1-2 litters, and that's it. And then they're gonna die by being killed by the other dogs in fight, or gonna be wounded enough to die, as actually the wildlife is organizing itself. Like the weak ones are
So I mean, I've been on a lot of Indian reservations, and watched a lot of what we call res dogs. And I always thought,
wait just a second. I just want to raise one question just there. If we would ask the dog, just to finish my thoughts, and then you take me to these Indian places, like where they said, like, if we would ask dogs, would you love more to live on a street, chase and be free, and live that life for 3-5 years? Or you would love to live on some sofa, or chained on the leash, be in some shelter for 20 years, right? It would be the same answer, I guess, that the lion would answer. Do you want to live out there in savannah in Africa for 5 years or 3 years or 10 years? Maybe no, they can. They said like every single time when you read about them, like 3-5 years, that's some for those breeds that are aggressive for the animals, that fight for the territory, and that are predatory, they live like 3 to 5, 6, 7 years max. So the lion has a 7 years life in nature, but they have like 25 to 30 years life in zoos.
Yeah, well, wolves don't live that. Gray wolves don't live that long either. Their lifespan is about 5 years, 8 years if they're lucky.
I mean like outside, but in a zoos you would have them like living 15, 16 years with no problem. Because
that's what I mean. That's what I mean. In the wild, the population takes care of itself, because most of them don't even survive that long.
So now we need to ask just the question, which dog is more happier? One on a street that shelter people want to bring, because that's very important. Who is a dog on a street? Is it that abandoned dog, or it's a street dog? If it's a street dog, we should think about them as an animal that belongs to a street and should be treated like that. But I agree, the corporate greed and money would say, like, first we need to create this empathic situation. Oh, poor dog, someone abandoned him. He's a mixed breed. Who knows how the cruel people will take care, and now he's on a street. Now we need to that story, and then they come into a shelter. Now you put that free animal, you're putting it into some shelter, and now you provide them food, kibbles probably, care, spaying and neutering immediately. So you're hyping up the bills of caring for that animal. And occasionally you're going to adopt that dog to someone that thinks that they did something good. What they did is actually put the dog that loves to be free, and probably would answer, if you would ask the dog, where would you love to live? He would say, leave me on the street. Right?
Yeah. So
that's what the first thing it's always in question is that critical question: what is the dog? And I think like
I think it's interesting, and just so that people aren't confused as well, is you're talking about actual feral free street dogs, not lost pets,
yeah, of
right?
course, because every single one,
Yeah.
every single shelter, not in America. I'm telling you, even in America, I think when you go to, I don't talk about shelters in New York and in major cities. I'm talking about rural parts of USA probably have a feral urban dogs around
Well, in
that are
North
not.
Carolina, we have the North Carolina dog, which some people call them North Carolina dingo
Oh,
because they
there is
actually, yeah.
there is an
Because,
amazing paper. I also recommend it to everyone called The Ecology of Stray Dogs, a study of free-ranging urban animals. And it was written in 1973. It's written by the Alan Beck, and he was talking about what's the difference in between urban dog and a pet that is left out. And in that particular book, he's talking about that he was talking, I think, like he was doing a Baltimore. I'm sorry, it's called like that story is written in Baltimore, and he
yeah.
was talking about.
While you're looking that up, I also wanted to mention that that's kind of what I'm talking about is like some of these shelters when they're running low on their profit margin, they actually go to Mexico and pick up those street dogs, which once they pick up those street dogs and then adopt them in the US and then they're trapped in a house, then everybody starts calling the trainers going, "Oh my gosh, I just rescued a dog from Mexico."
Now
Oh,
you
okay. I already know he's not happy. No, he's developing all these behavioral issues. Yep, because he belongs home, not necessarily in your house. And that rescue organization went out, grabbed a whole bunch of street dogs,
mm-hmm.
and brought them into the shelter to get them into people's homes, which you can't handle those feral dogs. They're feral,
Yeah, but
right?
every single dog, feral dog or not dog, they can be like, how can I see? They can be like also very cute and nice to the humans because probably that is why they were able to
Yeah, I mean,
catch
I've been to
them.
Mexico and those dogs are super calm, super chill. They visit their routes, they get food, they get water. Some people leave water out for those dogs. Yeah, you don't want to know another really good book by a really good author.
Mm.
I don't know if you know. I know him. He happens to be a really good friend of mine, and he wrote a book called "Awakening with Dogs." Can you see
Oh
that
my
book?
God. Are you really?
This is a super good book. My particular book happens to be a really rare copy because mine has this autograph signature there.
Are you really talking about that book?
Yeah, so yeah, I'll see if I can get you a copy. But he's a good friend of mine. He might be able to hit you up.
Did you like the book?
I just was so far been thumbing through. I'm going to continue reading it more in depth and take my time on it and make some notes. But yeah, thank you very much for mailing me that book. I loved it.
No, really, really pleasure about that. So I thank you so much for putting it up there. There he said like approximately he said like he was he said like talking about these urban dogs and he said like there is a percentage. He said like around 15% of the dogs that were urban settings of the Maryland, Baltimore. Is that correct? Like that's, am I right? Maryland was a city, and or the Baltimore is a city. I'm lost. Like what the Baltimore study, the city of Baltimore. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. A state of Maryland. So the state is Maryland and Baltimore is a city. Yeah. So he said like, he said like there was a 15% of the dogs observed by the study that were dogs out of which the humans were like, they were bred dogs that, he called them lost pets, right? Hold them. But only 15% of those dogs that were living out on the street were lost pets. The rest of them were the dogs that were reproduced and living out there like a cats and the cockroaches and the pigeons and every single other breed. Sometimes sometimes the and that's exactly how the Ray Coppinger is talking about. That is the evolutionary advantage of the dogs. So they look so cute. They look so cute, so the people take them out there, and it's a very known phenomena.
What do you think? What do you think? I want to ask you a question, but I wanted to make a small statement first, because I was cut off a little bit earlier. When I used to study dogs' behavior, I used to live in Flagstaff, Arizona, and I used to go to the Hoopa Reservation and just watch stray dogs there. And I always thought how it was interesting how the indigenous people on those reservations really lived in harmony with those stray dogs. They were never like here, everyone's bothered by it. But on the Indian reservations, it's just supernatural for them. They're not the indigenous people, I can tell you right now, are very empathetic. But to a point where they just let nature be nature. And I always wonder why aren't they trying to catch these dogs? Why aren't they trying to get them homes? And I started realizing when I was hanging out with the Hupa nation there that they were happy with it. There was a harmonious relationship. They helped take care of those dogs, even though they were feral. They treated them with respect. And they considered, I remember when I was talking to one Hupa man there, he was telling me that they don't consider them dogs. They consider them their own nation, their own tribe, their own people. So they have respect and they share that land. And it was so interesting because I remember I was at one of their local stores just getting something to drink. And my wife and I came out, of that store, and we see all these dogs. And they're all like, "Did you buy us anything?" Like, you could totally see that they were scavenging and waiting to see if there was anything we didn't want. And I took like some jerky meat that I had and I started throwing it on the floor because I figured I'm going to throw it on the floor. They're going to all go for it. Because what I thought I knew behavior, but what I was shocked by was when I threw the meat on the floor, instead of all the dogs going, "Ah," and trying to get it, they all backed away. And I went, whoa, they think it's poison. But the reason why they backed away was because these little puppies came up in the back and they let their little puppies eat first. And then whatever the puppies were full, then the pack actually went in to eat it. And I thought that was so awesome to see. But my question for you is, why is it genetically that humans always want to grab something and have this innate behavior of ownership over it? Like, I noticed that with my children too. As my children were growing up, I wanted them to appreciate the nature trails, and I'd take them out to the nature trails. And if my son saw a crab, first thing he'd say is, "Can I take it home? Can I have it?" And I'd say, "It's going to die at home. Put it back in the water." And they get so emotional over it. Or, or my son would see a hurt bird, and I'd be like, "Oh, leave the bird alone. It fell out of its nest. Leave it alone." But the human instinct is, "Can I have it? Can I own it? Can I keep it?" There was a TikTok that went viral locally here where some people saw a black cub bear on a tree. And it was clearly, it saw the human, so it ran up the tree. Mother was nowhere to be seen, just this baby black bear cub on a tree. And the first thing that people did when they saw it, they didn't call Fish and Game, they didn't call animal control, they didn't call anybody that should have come to help this bear because it was clearly scared. You want to know what they did with it? They pulled it off the tree and started taking selfies with it.
So what do you
think this is it? I almost want to say it is an innate behavior, because I remember I still feel that way. I might see a beautiful bird. I'm like, "Oh my God, what kind of bird is that? I want one." Like, where do you think the human's brain is at, where they just have this sense that they want to own anything that they see as far as an animal? They want to take it out of its environment and they want to own it. Where do you think that comes from?
So now there is a there's a couple answers to this question, but I need to give a little context to the answer, so kind of like it would make a little sense, right? So first of all, we live in era of consumerism, and everything is important. That we think that the free will of ours lies in: do we buy these shoes or that shoes? Or then when I think that that's my expression of the free will. Am I buying?
Well, we always want the shoes with the red bottoms on it, for sure.
Whatever. So it's kind of like that. I think that my freedom is in that I have a freedom of choice, right? And now I'm going out there in the supermarket, and when I'm buying this brand or that brand, that's my highest end of the highest, feeling of the freedom, where I'm free to choose among all of this stuff that I'm bombarded around with. So the humans are actually in the claws of these marketing mainstream campaigns of all kind of companies that are trying to find their, sun under the light. We were talking about this last time. I know how much Coca-Cola is bad for my kids, but in order to make money, I would still invest in that company, contributing to the diabetes of this country or of this world. So it's kind of like everything is so paradoxical, but that's where everything starts. That these big corporations that owns the marketing and owns the media, owns our scrolling and our, attention seeking and grabbing algorithms, are actually creating us to consume. So in order to consume, first, before you consume it, you need to own it. So before you want to consume anything, whether that's a food or a bottle of the wine or the restaurant or the shoe or the dog, you need to buy it. You need to own it. And the best way to own it is kind of like, if you want to take away that ownership in a way, I bought it, there is a much more moral sense that's also developed through this kind of like to this pressure of us saving the world. So there is the humans that are actually destroying this world on one end. On the other end, we try to save the same world we destroyed. So, and then that's, for example, I don't know why this story popped up when you ask me the question. So I'm going to talk about that story. Maybe it's relevant. How it's relevant, maybe we're going to figure out as I talk about that story. So, about these sea worlds and killer whales and everything else. So there was like 56 years ago, they were not breeding them inside aquariums. They were like hunting them out. I don't know, is the practice still allowed, or can that be done now as well? But there was a particular little killer whale in Florida, I think somewhere in a SeaWorld, called Lolita. And she was like a little girl found like 50 years ago in the nature, and she was both in the aquarium and she was, living there all her life. And there was a rescue organizations that were trying to free her and to take her back into a wild and to do all kind of other things. Finally, the petitions and everything, they find the sponsors. Entire project was about to cost around $200 million. Is to catch her, to put her somewhere closer to the place where she's going to be released. And they find the place where she was captured. And out there in the wild is still part of the family that she's very, very close connected with. So they were thinking about that she might be able to kind of like find her place back. Yes. What actually happened is 5 days before she was about to be released, she dies. She dies in a aquarium after 50 years of being captured. Just 5 days before she's about to be free again, she dies. And now there is a lot of now, if we observe this story from point of your question, why do people want to own things is actually they're thinking that providing them man close by life to any wild animal would be much easier for animal itself than if they would need to struggle inside the nature to find the food, to fight against predators and to find their place to survive. And that's kind of true, that we are able, if we provide them, that's what actually how the contract in between wolves and humans were made. You provide the food, provide a shelter, provide a social interaction, and I'm yours. right? That's
Yeah.
kind of like, and that's what we do today. Just the question becomes why, in order for me to enjoy the nature, why I do need to own it. And once when I'm owning it, like in the case of Lolita, why do I want to reverse everything? It's only about how do I feel. It's all about this deep feeling and sense of need to save, to be good to someone. While actually now we are coming to the point of the book you just handed up.
Uh,
It's a sense of belonging, and it's a sense of feeling abandoned yourself, like ourselves. When I
yeah.
feel abandoned, and when I feel not loved, and when I feel I'm missing a care for myself, in order to feel fulfilled with that big gap and a hole in my heart, I'll try to offer it to the people or the creatures in need. And if I can't find ones around myself, I'm going to create ones in need and try to feel good about saving the world. And that's the first thing, you oftentimes have this, when you talk to really straightforward, kind of like psychologists, or, many of them are mainstream. It's kind of like we have this idea of uh, going out to save the world and think about the lions in Africa or India and save the elephants and save the world, uh, because we are not able to save ourselves.
So
It's all
what do you think is a healthy balance of that? So, for example, like we were talking about PETA, right? Where PETA doesn't feel that anybody should be owning any animal.
Yeah, and in that end, I completely agree with them 100%. Even
Yeah.
when we say like how the perfect world would look like and as you said, like and that's what my book is all about.
Mhm.
Why I can develop such a nice relationship with the dogs that I'm not able to develop with my parents, with my children, with my spouses, with my business partners. I'm not able to love, and I'm not able to be loved by any other human being as I can love and be loved by the dog.
You know, it's super interesting. A funny thing during that COVID time
Mm-hmm.
was, when they started saying that you have to kind of separate yourself from people. There was this one woman that called me because she had a behavioral case with her dog, and it was starting to be very territorial around her and with her husband, meaning that her husband couldn't come anywhere near her. Her husband couldn't go anywhere near the room or the bed, and they wanted some help resolving the issue. And as I started to ask more questions, I came to this realization that this woman made her husband sleep in a separate room, and she slept in her own room with the dog.
Mm-hmm. So now, and that's kind of
I'm
like,
like, all right, so you
uh,
just swapped partners there.
no, and that's exactly what my book is talking about.
Yeah.
We are not able to apply responsible ownership, neither to provide those dogs that will live with dignified life if we are emotionally connected to them. That
And,
emotional.
that's another thing too. So another instance was where I had a woman call me, for her behavioral case, and she was explaining that her dog had bit her child in the kitchen.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I started saying, okay, so, kind of share that story with me, what happened? Well, my son was in the kitchen with the dog, and I was nearby but wasn't paying attention. All of a sudden, I heard my little son, he's like 9, scream, and the dog bit him. So I said, okay. I'm like, this is the most important part. What did you do when the dog did that? Because I wanted to know, did she reprimand the dog? Did she send it outside? I mean, it just bit your kid, your baby, your 8-year-old,
Mm-hmm.
9-year-old child. What did you do? And she said, oh my gosh. Right away, I looked at him and I said, what did you do? What did you do to him? And I was confused. And I said, so you were yelling at the dog? I said, no, no, no. I was saying that to my son. And I went, okay. So your son's in the kitchen with the dog, and he bit your son, and you yelled at your son and asked your son, what did you do to the dog? What did you do to the dog? She goes, yeah. And I said, at this point, I have to remind you that it doesn't matter what your son did. That's his dog. His dog should not be biting him in, and you're scolding the wrong sentient being. If anything, send your dog outside. That's like that's like you telling me, "Oh my gosh, Tony, my husband hit me," and I see you have a shiner, and I look at you and I go, what do you mean? Yeah, my husband hit me really hard, and I look at her and say, "Well, what did you do?"
Mm. Yeah, it's kind of like a very that's kind of
The priorities
that's kind of
I think it's so
scabby
interesting
there.
how humans have made their living situations or have lowered their bars to such a low standard that they're so their priorities just are not right.
And again, we are coming back. We said yesterday, this industry exists so that people can spend money and can buy things that they don't need and services that they don't need, because we are creating this field, and this a lot of businesses exist to take care about the dogs and to provide to the dogs with the care that we provide to the children. And that's again disrespect of the dogs, because the dogs are not our children. The dogs are not cannot replace our children. And the responsibility that arises that we have over other species override the emotional entanglement that we might have with them. Because as you go through the book, you're gonna see that I was talking a lot that oftentimes the humans are not able to establish the reasonable and responsible relationship with the dogs because they are emotionally entangled. Nothing wrong with the emotional connection, in harmonious connection, but the harmonious connection calls for the understanding of the differences and the needs based on those differences. So the dog is completely different species with their own needs in order to thrive, survive, and live long, happy, healthy life, as well as the humans have their own needs. If we mix, and who has an interest for this to be mixed up? The people that want to make money, the industries that want to make money, making a baby care industry out from the pet care industry, and more. And then again, that leads to the consumerism. It's not important, do you need it? And you think that if you that you actually, you practice your freedom by choosing, do you want something black or white, or do you want something of this or that brand? That's not a freedom, that's a consumerism, and that's what this life and world around us that we live in the moment is. And unfortunately, the dogs are trapped every single where in between money and the people's emotions. And what the industry wants is emotional entanglement, because then you're going to do everything that you can in order to provide that dog with the things we need. If I take care about that dog with all that such love and respect, what's mean is that I'm missing it. I don't have it from my parents. And oftentimes you will see when you go, how do we know that we are emotionally entangled? On the end of the book, you have that little questionnaire. So when in the book, I wrote the stories, very interesting stories about human canine dog emotional entanglement. So when I was having a relationship with a dog, because I was seeing the dog as a creature, but emotionally I was connecting with my father, my mother, my kids, my unborn kids, my old love that I never married, or myself, my inner self, my inner child. But it's not a dog. It's not that dog that I live with. It's something that lives through the dog that I'm missing. And in order for us and every reader that reads the book to come to the conclusion, is there any emotional entanglements? I have a little questionnaire. And as you answer the questions, now I can say you because you have a book. If you start answering the questions, you're going to see that actually dogs come in our life specifically with a big sense of purpose. And that sense of purpose can be connected directly with a time when the idea or the manifestation of the dog suddenly unexpectedly, like a gift present from the God, from someone else, from my wife or whoever came into my life. But it always brings a significant emotional moment to it. So either something great happened to us that can be impacting our emotional state of mind, of being, being something bad. So we experience some bad thing happen to us just before or around. It can be, I got a dog and like 3 months later, my mom died. Or my mom died and 2 months later, I just got a dog. Or I got a dog and I got a child 2 months later. Or I got a child and 3 months later, there is a dog coming in my life. So or I got a job, or I got a raise, or I got fired. And or I got change my house, change the country.
Yeah, I think a lot. I mean, a lot of people that tend to, and I'm not going to say the majority of them, but they usually have a dog, or it's like an emotional purchase.
Yeah, it is emotional, but that's what I keep asking and telling. It's an emotional purchase because you want to own part of yourself that you are missing, and that is why we want to own. And then now there is a metaphor in everything. Metaphor in, do I want to own the bird, or I want to own the dog, or I want to own the cat, or I want to own the wolf, or I want to own that little cub, the little bear. So, and then what that emotional purchase, that doesn't need to be necessarily purchase of me buying something, maybe it can be me saving something or someone, then brings me that sense of fake. It's a fake sense of having it, because what I'm missing I actually don't have. And then I'm gonna actually emotionally abuse that animal, because I would be treating it as thing I need. Love of my father, that I never met, love of my mom that died when I was a child, my sister that I never happened to develop a nice relationship, my kids that just left home. Everything of that leaves significant impact in my life.
And that's a lot of the reasons why people get dogs, for sure.
Yeah, and
a lot of times when I get clients, I ask them why did they get their dog? Oh, the kids moved out, and that house is huge. I don't have anybody here with me. So,
and that's again, we are coming back to that selfishness, the human selfishness, but because we are also like raised that it's very difficult to cope with the emotions. If our great grandparents would see how do we live with the dogs, I don't know, will they be proud of us or they would be ashamed of us? That would be the question, like to ask a question, if our great grandparents would see us, how do we live the lives today, in order to one another, in contrast to one another, in the way we treat our spouses and my husbands, our children, animals around, the dogs and everything else. I think like most likely they would be much ashamed of us than they would love about
it reminds me of a meme that I saw once. There's a meme of a wolf saying, go be with the humans, they said. It's going to be fun, they said. And then you see a picture of after, and it's a domesticated dog with candles, a funny hat, glasses, and a stroller.
So that that's
what happens when you get too close to humans.
So that's about, I think, like that's your question about why the people are wanting all of these things. I think it's very, very, very amazing questions to raise, and also very, very philosophical question to answer and to also think about. And this is a question for every single one of us as a dog owners or dog care enthusiasts, is what do I see through the dog? What do I feel through the dog? How the dog makes me complete, like my wife is not doing, or my husband is not doing, or my children never did to me. Where is the deep hidden feeling of missing, incompleteness, and emotional entanglement that I'm going through? And I think that I can get it through this creature, which actually on the end I abuse, because I do not let that dog be a dog or that puppy be a puppy. I use them in order to make myself feel good. then I'm going out there, I'm saving left and right whatever I can save, because in order for first to save someone, you need to agree that you are superior than one you are saving. And there is a very big question is, you know that Mother Teresa is very controversial nun that was, having her campuses to help people end their life, like on the end of the life in Calcutta, India. She got a Nobel Prize, Nobel Peace Prize. I don't know which year, but also she have more critiques than supporters, because what she's criticized for was that she actually didn't help those people that she was putting in those shelters. What she said, and she said, I didn't bring them here to make this become a hospital for a healing of the physical body. I bought them surrounded with the love and care so they can die peacefully, because that's what they were missing. They were alone, they were abandoned, they didn't have anyone. And in the stages of the life when they needed a support to transition, needed someone to hold their hand, to pray for them and to save their soul. And that's what she was like also criticized. And they said, like, if this nun would just turn these things in hospital and use that money to buy medicine and make these hospitals be more gorgeous, things like that. But she said, like, you cannot see the smile on those people's eyes and on those people's faces when they were like kind of, breathing their last breaths, how dignified that life ended by just having someone to hold their hands and telling them, don't worry, all is going to be okay.
Yeah.
And when we grow, and that's what really empathy is, to be able to witness other people and other creatures suffering, not causing the suffering of others, so you can witness it and not only actually, like, how do we solve this planet by actually leaving it alone? Because the moment humans leave alone, this planet is going to reinstate itself as going to do it without or with humans. It's not about that this planet cannot survive with the humans. We cannot survive things that we are doing to the planet. And occasionally, even if we destroy every single thing by the radiation and by the poisoning and by pollutants, and that causes our distinction as a species from the planet gonna maybe cure for 2 million years. And after then, again, like in no heartbeat, some other type of the life gonna start working and start happening on this planet. But the humans, as we know, probably wouldn't exist. So it's not about the nature. It's not about the planet, because the planet has time. The planet has sources and resources. And
the planet's going to take care of itself whether we're here or not. That's
there
for
you
sure.
go. Yeah. So the question becomes
let me before we sign off, because I know we're going to have to sign off soon. Let me ask you this question. It'll put you on the spot a little bit. Why do you have a dog?
Yeah, that's very interesting question. So I was thinking actually that all my wounds are cured with my Tito. And one time we can get back to a story about Tito. How did I had that dog suffer for so much out from my own problems that I was actually having. I was anxious, going through some business traumas and my relationships and everything. My life was a mess. And that which kind of relationship, I know why I did had a Tito. That was my previous dog.
Yeah.
And then the story of Tito is very, very sensitive to me. So maybe we can leave that story for the next time.
Well, let me ask you a question. So I understand the emotion behind why you had that first dog, but what about your current dog? Why do you have your current dog?
And then after that, I said I was starting to go to my therapy. It was then when I discovered the family constellation therapy. Then, in time to come, I became a family constellation therapist, specializing in a human canine dynamic of the families that have dogs as well. And then I was thinking actually that I healed all my wounds, but it was like that. Yeah,
But you
and
still
that's
have a
what the dog fulfilled my purpose. The dog fulfilled the purpose in my life, and now I'm able to develop a relationship with other humans that I don't need a dog as a tool anymore.
yeah, yeah.
So I stayed without a dog, let's say I didn't have a dog for, that was like 2015, 16. So since 2016,
Mhm.
I didn't have a dog. So I stayed with no Tito at 2016, and until 2023 I didn't have a dog. But then something happened in 2021. My mom died, and
Huh.
she was, and you don't get a chance to kind of like experience that two times in your life. So that
Right.
happens one, and no matter how old are you, your mother died, and now you are alone. And she died in October 21.
Hmm.
And because of all of those restrictions, I was not able to go to her funeral.
That sucks so bad. Oh my
Yes.
God. Yeah.
So it's kind of like but then on the end I was just putting pros and cons. I kind of
That's
like
gonna make you so mad now because with all that we know about COVID now, you totally could have went to that funeral.
yeah, I must tell you, yes. But on the other side, at that particular point, I literally used the tools of family constellation
Yeah.
to have my heart in peace with that decision.
Yeah.
So at that time, I would say, if I would be her, and if I would wear her shoes, dying, and I would question my son or the daughter being overseas, far away, having that doubt in their mind. Who will I betray if I don't go, or who will I betray if I go? Will I betray myself if I show up on my mother's funeral? Or I'm going there so I can be by my side of my father and friends and family and everyone that will maybe judge me if I do not show up. And I made a peace because I knew that if my kids were to decide, it should come from the straight point of they wouldn't let me down, and they wouldn't betray my love if they do not show up on my funeral, because that has nothing to do with how much they love me or how much I love my mom.
Right.
And I had this clear image of I don't need to go there in order to be there.
Hmm.
So, and then I was thinking actually that was a decision of the wise, grown-up man that's facing such a hard, challenging time on top of losing a parent. Until Henny didn't came in my life 1 year later. Uh, and then I saw his eyes when he came into our life. It was like, oh my God, I know what I'm missing now. And I know what I'm going through now. And I'm go how this little dog can help me reconnect with my mom on a level that I never ever imagined possible. But what Henny is in my life also as a big teacher is that Henny is the first dog in my life that I do not cross the line with. So he's the first dog in my life that is the dog. And I
So,
have
so, so
and
what
I
do you think? So what would be, because we're talking about how kind of, people are kind of putting their emotions onto the dog and not letting the dog be a dog. What do you, and we're talking about PETA, like you're kind of like, hey, we should be owning any animals. So at what point is would you suggest that it's okay to get a dog?
But for example, like I wouldn't now justify and make myself be a hypocrite, like you said, that there must arrive a time in space in which we won't have owning any animal, and that would be good for the mankind. But I think I was on myself. I literally I'm able to draw the line that I
Mhm.
got a dog a year later when my mom died, almost around the time when it was a year of her passing, right?
Right.
So there must be, and there actually was, still something to learn. And I agree to a dog from the emotional standpoint of view, because I was able to agree to my vulnerability, to say that I am not strong enough to go through this experience myself, and I need a support, but not an emotional support animal, not emotional, whatever we label to them, like a service animal. No, I need a dog. I need a dog that I will be able finally, maybe for the first time in my life, to treat as a dog, and to know the boundary and to know the line that I will learn not to cross, and finally to live what I preach in let's say, last 10 years of my life, since I left since Tito was my biggest wake up call. And after Tito, everything changed in my life. And I started to talk from the perspective of the dog. And that you see, like, entire project we are around, it's dog school for people and that dog podcast for people, or what the dog needs us to do. And now I'm actually able to see that in my relationship with Henny, and my relationship with my husband, and his relationship with Henny, and everything else that is actually happening around me at this point, and Henny as a little purebred puppy on dog. So you cannot go more extreme in, compared to this modern world appreciation of the mixed breed rescues and everything. I got back to the point where I said, yes, this is my challenge. Not to get emotionally entangled, but to get emotional. I'm now able to see that emotional healing that comes with the Henny by my side is something completely different. Now I can talk from that perspective, that we can have dog without abusing them, without putting them on.
Did you who came first, Veteran or Henny?
Oh, no, Veteran came first. Yes, Veteran came first. Yeah. So Veteran came 2018, and the Henny came 2022, right? Yeah, 2022. And my mom died 2021. And one funny thing, the last time we both met, my mom, and she was, I don't know what year was that, when we were in Serbia. We met together, and then she met him, and everything was cute, and we have like a lovely time together. And then, like, she knew somehow on some level that there is time of her going is slowly coming, even though at that time we were not even aware of anything would go wrong as it went.
Right.
And she said such a nice thing to him. She said, "Please take care about my son." That was so sweet, and that's so vibrating.
And then Veteran went, it's a lot of pressure. He's so high maintenance.
Yeah, it is. And I oftentimes, practicing this family constellation interaction, I oftentimes release him from that wow, right? You don't need to take care of it. So just my mom's way of telling that she would love someone to take care of me, but you don't owe that to her. And then later on, when you're right, it's tremendously big pressure, but I think I have the most wonderful relationship that one can pray for. And the Henny comes as a support through this little journey of mine, in which I have actually chance to prove it to myself that this distance, when you create that space for the dog next to you, and protect your space, and let the dog have his space and their space, and protect their space, in that intermediate space, in that vacuum, in that space that's left in between two of you, like me and my dog, there is a pure love and the harmony that happens in that freedom of choice, where I'm choosing him and he chooses me as on our own convenient time. Whenever
that's a really good point, probably to end the podcast. Yeah. But I was just gonna say, because that's exactly what I work on with my clients. Is my clients think I'm going to do all this dog training or positive reinforcement or clicker training, and then oftentimes I realize, what needs to happen is you need to have your space, and the dog
Dog
needs to
need to
have
have their
their
space.
space.
Yes.
And the dog needs to know the difference between their space and your space,
Yes.
and how you relate to that space, and how you guys navigate through that space, and how you guys respect one another's personal space, as well as being invited into personal space when you need to share that affection and that camaraderie. And recognizing that sometimes your dog can't deal with you either. They want you to leave them alone.
Yes.
Like I have people go, "Oh no, something's wrong with my dog. What's wrong? He won't come inside the house. Where's he at right now? At the front
Yeah.
door? On the street?" They go, "No, he's in the backyard."
Let
Okay,
him
what's the
be.
problem? He won't come in. Well,
Yeah.
then leave him out.
Yeah,
He
that's
probably
amazing.
needs a break from you.
And that's
Yeah.
exactly what I'm kind of like trying to teach my students here in a school, at the dog school for people, when we learn about the grooming, where I said like we need to bring dogs to a place where they love being groomed, right? Because they can still accept the grooming, they can still tolerate the grooming, aside of hating it too. But if you bring the dog to a point in which they love being brushed and bathed and groomed and styled and touched, and when you go through them, it's kind of like some love that flows through every single touch in between two of you. It's when you allow the dog to not love when you touch the feet, right?
Yeah.
You don't go to reinforcing you loving the feet. Respect that they don't love it at the moment, and slowly, so once they do something, you leave it and you do something else. And as you gain trust, the dog will occasionally agree to the feet as well. But if you force it and let's reinforce it and no, he needs to listen to me because the client is coming in 2 hours to pick it up and I need to finish it. It's a pressure from every single. It's not a time to do it. And exactly what you just said now, that my space and their space and space of togetherness is something that creates this bond that can be developed with the dogs. And now I can leave it through the Henny. So the question you ask is pure. I do have it at the moment when my mom died, came like in retrospect to that emotional processes that I was going through. But as a great teacher, to show me that there is my space, but as I love to protect my space from Henny and appreciate his space, that's exactly what I can do with my husband. That's exactly what I can do with my students. That's exactly what I can do with my business partners and everyone else. Have my space, allowed everyone else's their space, and create a space of togetherness wherever we come together and whenever every single one of us pleases. Can you imagine the world this little thing can teach us? How we can live together with each other and every other species on this planet, if only we could agree to yours and mine and ours.
Yeah. Instead, we just want to own everybody else's space.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. Well, okay, brother, it's good to talk to you as always.
Likewise.
So, yeah, we went pretty. We started off. It was crazy. I don't know. We're gonna have different subject lines for this podcast, but we kind of went into just the animal rescue industry and how it keeps animals victimized.
But yeah, that's exactly solution to that is mine, yours, and ours, and that's exactly what brings this world to a piece of harmonious interaction with each other, and a harmonious interaction with the world around us that includes dog as well. So once we allow dog to have their space, as everything that we talked about is actually a conclusional solution to this kind of overpopulation of the dogs and everything that we think, and the overpopulation of the humans and the planet and destroying, and everything that we do for comes around and bite us in the ass, because no matter how great intention it can be, down the road turns to be bad. Like for example, in Lolita's case, she said, I did a family constellation therapy. I have family constellation, like a little session on the Lolita's case, kind of like with respect of her passing and everything that she lived through. You know what the answer of hers was? That I was happy at the aquarium.
Hmm.
I didn't want to leave. And I feared the freedom because I was completely free within the seaquarium. And the freedom frightened her so much, what the people were doing from the pure heart of, I want to help this animal. And then you had the trainers that were talking about, some of them would say like,
Well, I mean, I guess would it be the same as I think I'm just going to go ahead and get one of my wolf dogs and just throw him out in the wild and see how he does.
yeah,
It's going to be a big shock to the system. I mean, if you take your Dalmatian or you take your Papillon and say, you know what, I think my Papillon needs to be free right
them
now.
up.
Yeah, he's not going to live very long. He's going to
Yeah.
die very shortly. He's going to be dysfunctional. The other thing also too is in the case of Lolita, taking a killer whale from captivity like that, there's so much to learn from that whale's pod, and so much cognitive development that whale didn't get because a lot of people don't know this, but killer whales, they have their own culture, just like we have African culture, Serbian culture, indigenous or Mexican culture. The killer whales, they actually have different cultures in their separate regions that they live. They actually have different languages.
Oh my
So
God.
all killer whales don't speak the same language. They have a little language dysfunction like we do because I can't speak Serbian, you know. So I can only imagine that if they released her after being in captivity for so long, she didn't get to develop that pod's language. They would have just looked at her like a dysfunctional, mentally delayed whale. They could have even beaten her up.
And can you imagine like how strong that field interaction of the human goodwill? Actually, you can't say that these people didn't have any great intentions. They raised the money, they find a sponsor, they took her, they organized everything. And if anyone would just ask her, what do you feel about this? Do you want to leave this prison of yours that you had for the 50 years? And what she said, she got some infection that she just died 5 years, that infection could be cured, like normally. And she just got something she couldn't recover from. And when I did this constellation, it was so clearly that she said, I got afraid of my freedom. And I didn't need the freedom because I learned to be free within these walls. And when you learn, you know how
Well, I mean, if you think about it, that's really all she would know.
Yeah.
She wouldn't know anything else. So I can imagine. I mean, that's the only reason. That's the reason why you can't raise a wolf in captivity and then decide we're going to go ahead and let it be back into the wild. That just does. I mean, that's just any basic behavioral science will contest to that. You know what? This is something for anybody that's watching. Is next week we're going to talk about, animals in the entertainment industry, right? And so remember that documentary Blackfish?
Okay, you want me to? Okay,
did you better never watch it?
Yeah, I start to watch it, but then I said like I don't want to watch it until you do not tell me we're gonna discuss it in front of the camera. So I'm gonna get myself ready for the next week then.
Yeah. So let's talk about that documentary Blackfish, which was involving SeaWorld and Marine World, using the whales and the dolphins as entertainment. But let's watch that documentary Blackfish. And also that link that I sent you is a YouTube link. So for the people that are watching this podcast, just include that link, Blackfish, in the description. So that way the people, the podcast viewers can watch that documentary before next week. So we can all talk about it.
Okay, wonderful. I can't wait for that. Thank you, Tony, so much. And thank you, everyone, tuning in to today with us. And no matter if you are watching this live or you're going to watch this as a recorded one, but I cannot wait for the next Wednesday, 7:30 p.m. Eastern time, correct?
Absolutely. Yeah. 7:30 Eastern, and we'll be doing this again. Bye, everybody.
Love you. Bye.